always tricky to talk about the environment because it is our mother, it is the matrix that sustains us, and yet all discussions gravitate toward the crisis that haunts it, generated by us, and now hopefully managed by us in a way that biological diversity and human diversity can somehow make a peace with each other, so that the glories of these domains of nature, and they are both domains of nature, are not compromised one for the other. And it always, there's no dearth of current news on the front where this battle is being fought. Day before yesterday, I'm sure some of you saw it in the newspaper, the recent measurements on the ozone hole over the Antarctic show that it is depleted beyond the theoretical limit. In other words, where it is depleted more thoroughly than theory predicted in its most extreme modeling of that process. This is only one of a number of areas where the planet is being challenged in different ways. I was in England this summer, and the newspapers were full of stories about fissionable material and plutonium triggers for tactical nuclear weapons being peddled in the red light district of Frankfurt. This is another area where the health of the earth, the health of our children, is held in bondage by the least noble among us, to put it mildly. So, in a sense, we're in a dark age. Ozone values are not expected to turn up before the turn of the century, no matter what policies are put in place down here. Starvation, displacement of populations, collapse of central authority, all of these things, terrible in themselves, extract a terrible toll on the environment. And that is rarely factored into these things. The world is growing ever more complex. Every day, every minute, every hour. The number of inventions, the number of connections among people, the number of people, all these things are increasing, compounding our creative potential, compounding our problems in a mad race between what seem to be incredibly positive forces and incredibly negative forces. And in this kind of situation, of course, each moral person is challenged by the old Tolstoyan question, what is to be done? We each have very limited resources, limited strength, limited funds. Where shall we put our shoulder to the wheel to do the most good? This is a very complicated question. If we save the rainforests but ignore the threat from planetesimal impacts, we may turn out to have entirely wasted our resources and betrayed our trust to the rest of life on the planet. So it's not simply about doing good, it's about being effective. And I wanted this morning to just list, it's a laundry list, areas that require attention, and then to discuss sort of the overarching metaphor that might make it easier to deal with what otherwise is an incredibly daunting challenge that we face, simply to save the land you're standing on, the air you're breathing, the water you're drinking. In a sense, this issue was postponed for 40 or 50 years while the male dominators played the capitalism-communism shuffle, and the rest of us were the marks conned by that particular bit of historical chicanery. Now, the veil has been rent. Marxism's status as a paper tiger has been exposed. And what we hear of now are trade agreements. Free trade. Don't let anybody kid you. Free trade is a license to peddle crap everywhere. That's what free trade is about. Trade in physical items manufactured out of the body of the earth should be made as difficult and expensive as possible. The piling up of material goods, what I call consumer object fetishism, is the force that is destroying this planet, not only where it is actively practiced, here, for example, but throughout the world where people yearn to practice it, because the images being beamed down to them from MTV tell them that without a 3-car garage, without a sunken bathtub, without a sailboat, you are nothing. And the fact of the matter is, there isn't enough glass, metal, and plastic in the near surface of this planet to deliver a middle-class lifestyle to all the people who have now been sold on that particular style. So I really believe that we were misled, blinded, bamboozled by this great historical struggle between communism and capitalism, because both distorted the environment, toxified vast amounts of land, and squandered the treasure of their peoples in unconscionable ways. Well, now, where do we go from there? I think we have to draw back away from our various botanical gardens, seed preservation programs, programs that feed the hungry, the little things that we each commit ourselves to, and try and get an overarching understanding of the process in which we're embedded. And I believe that when you do that, the two great polarities that emerge in the human world are materialism versus eco-consciousness. When I first began formulating what I would say here, I didn't say materialism. I said capitalism. But I really believe that capitalism can be saved, or at least partially reconstructed to serve human needs. Materialism cannot. It cannot, because there is not enough matter around for us to fabricate it into our toys without drowning ourselves in the toxic byproducts of that historical effort. Materialism versus eco-consciousness. It's not a very fair match. They have all the money, all the guns, all the propaganda. What we have on our side is that if they win, everybody dies. How long will the battle go on before this perception makes its way into the headquarters of the other side? I myself don't know. Here, I'd like to go over a list of areas that require attention. Some of this will be no news to you, some of it perhaps. Toxic disposal. We don't have a theory of toxic disposal. What we have is a theory of toxic hiding, shell games, postponement, tabling. We need a real method of toxic disposal. Until it comes, we continue to sequester radioactive and toxic materials throughout the world in the body of the earth. Many of these toxic materials have half-lives of hundreds of thousands of years. Again, yesterday's newspaper. Greenpeace reported encountering a Soviet frigate in the Sea of Japan, dumping nuclear cores and nuclear coolant into the Sea of Japan, where the Japanese population draws 30% of its sea catch. We need toxic disposal. Plants have a role to play here. Many of you know that the solanaceous plants, like the jimsonweed and the datura, sequester heavy metals, but this information has not been made the centerpiece of a crash program to clean up the land, simply because people do not care enough, or rather human institutions, read corporations, do not care enough. Environmental restoration, another area where tiny pilot projects are held up in such a fashion to give people permission to think, well, that's under control, at least. We don't have to worry about that. Most of the restoration programs that you hear about are, in fact, cosmetic efforts designed to divert your attention from some greater horror being perpetuated somewhere else. You have to be very sophisticated, because the enemy you're playing with is incredibly sophisticated. We need planet-friendly technologies. An obvious one is hydrogen. Hydrogen, when burned in an automobile or a boiler, combines with oxygen to produce water. It is a technology that is non-polluting. And by developing liquid natural gas storage and transportation technologies, we have proven that we can handle hydrogen. Hydrogen is highly explosive, but if you blow up a hydrogen loading or unloading depot, all you have is a very violent, localized explosion. You don't have planetary contamination of the water and the air. Hydrogen is the direction in which we should be moving. And the people who have studied it have put in place all kinds of technological schemes for bringing it to us. But the problem is that those who are already peddling natural gas and petroleum byproducts are not interested in this scheme. Their loyalty then is not to the species or to the planet, but the bottom line. In any civilized society, putting the bottom line ahead of civilization and planet would be a hanging offense. But not here. Another area, population control. This is one that everyone agrees with, but the facts of the matter have not, I think, been fully explored. A child born to a woman in San Francisco or Malibu will consume between 800 and 1,000 times the natural resources of a child born to a woman in Bangladesh. Where do we preach birth control? That's right, Bangladesh. The women who could make the notice that if every woman had one child, the population of this planet would fall by 50% in one generation. Now, without war, without famine, without displacement of populations, the population of the planet would fall by half in the lifetime of most people sitting here. I don't think people realize this. We tend to assume the population problem is unstoppable. The women most likely to hear the message that one woman, one child leads to a saner world are the highly educated women of the high-tech industrial democracies, the kind of women sitting in this room. Since their children are using 800 to 1,000 times more resources than the children of the third world, if 10 to 15% of the women in the high-tech industrial democracies were to follow this policy, the release of pressure on world resources would be visible within 10 to 15 years. Now, I realize these suggestions are highly controversial, and I have a number of them, so I don't want to. We could hold a whole conference on that concept. The other thing, another item, we need to deconstruct product fetishism. We need to, through the media, establish the idea that a Zen-like spareness is the highest expression of social consciousness when it comes to interior decorating, the building of country houses, and so forth and so on. Deconstruct product fetishism so that the Kikuyu or the Yanomamo become the paragons of behavior in terms of relating to material existence. We do not need to sell our souls to junk and then inherit a ruined planet. It makes no sense at all. This is a problem because the techniques of capitalism are to use advertising to spread discontent. They are selling you something you don't already have. Discontent is the obvious way to move you to make that purchase. So you're constantly being bombarded with images of your own inadequacy unless you have the correct running shoes, German automobile, or house in the country. Next item, demilitarization. There is much talk about getting rid of nuclear weapons because the leadership of these bankrupt fascist oligarchies could themselves be incinerated by nuclear weapons. But where is the lantern-jawed lad from Alabama on the subject of getting rid of all armies on this planet? Now is the moment because there are not large crystallized power blocks set against each other. How about a 15% reduction in all military budgets across the board? No one can claim that their security is lessened because their enemies too would reduce military spending. Apparently there's a big game going on dealing all this lethal junk all over the world, and that's why there's no mention of demilitarizing even such regimes as the Haitian or the Somalian regime. It is apparently a natural right of dominator jerks to have as much weaponry as they can buy with the money they steal and squeeze out of their captive populations. Another area, democratic values and human rights. Democratic values and human rights. You cannot build an eco-consciousness out of a population of slaves ruled by oligarchs. And that is the situation for 1/3 of the human species, so long as the octogenarian trash that rules China is in place. Where is our government on that issue? And that leads me to government accountability. Are we making our governments accountable in the matter of preserving the environment, cleaning up toxic waste, disposing of the manufacturing processes of these oh-so-necessary weapons stockpiles that these characters feel they have to have?